Relentless, probing, fearless. This is Emmy Award-winning Full Disclosure with Leslie Dutton, bringing you the truth by revealing the news behind the news.
Richard Fine has been in solitary confinement in the Los Angeles County Jail for 7 months. His crime? He's pointed out that the LA Superior Court judges are being illegally paid $46,000 every year over and above their state salaries by the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. Superior Court Judge Yaffe sentenced Mr. Fine to an indefinite term of coercive confinement. Full Disclosure has conducted a number of phone interviews with the jailed attorney, Richard Fine. We filed a series of requests with the Sheriff's Department to interview him in person in jail, but have been denied access at every request. Why? We want to know. Victoria Kim from the Los Angeles Times was allowed to interview Mr. Fine. She wrote this article, which with the limitations of the paper gave a brief account of Mr. Fine's situation. But Full Disclosure is still being denied access. In fact, the spokesman, Steve Whitmore, sent this email in response to our request. The sheriff did not approve the LA Times reporter access to this inmate. She apparently did so on her own. Isn't this alarming? That anyone who wants can walk into the jail anytime they want? We suppose the sheriff had more control over the jails. Perhaps the issue is cameras in the jail. But wait. ABC's 2020 producer Terry Whitcraft took their cameras into the jail to interview an inmate for their show, just a few days prior to our last request. Armed with this information, we telephoned the sheriff and placed another request to interview Mr. Fine. The sheriff's spokesman, Whitmore, not only said no, but hell no.
Hi, Leslie. This is Steve Whitmore. I am unfortunately the bearer of bad news. The sheriff has repeatedly told me that that will not happen, and so your request has been denied. And he has not. I just talked to him yesterday about this, and he said it again. He said, no, that's not going to happen. So it's not going to happen, Leslie, and I'm sorry to have to deliver that to you, but that is what the sheriff's decision is, and it's his discretion. And I know that is bad news, and I'm sorry for that, but that is a final decision. Thank you, and stay well. Bye.
Why? Why is the Sheriff's Department afraid of poor little Full Disclosure? Our purpose is to show how Mr. Fine is being treated and allow our viewers to form their own opinion regarding Mr. Fine's incarceration. So why won't the sheriff allow us into the jail with our cameras? He has before, and in fact his deputies gave us a tour of the inmate reception area. As part of his defense, Mr. Fine has submitted a writ of habeas corpus, which the court ordered the sheriff to respond with the reasons why he's holding Mr. Fine. The sheriff refused and asked to be dismissed from the case. And when the matter was appealed to the district court, Federal Judge Walters denied the sheriff's request as moot. Why? Why didn't the sheriff state that Judge Yaffe ordered him to keep Mr. Fine in jail? Is he protecting Judge Yaffe because the judge is doing something illegally? Are the judges protecting the sheriff? Or is the sheriff protecting the judges? And is Full Disclosure going to have to get a court order to gain media access to Mr. Fine? We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Please respond to our survey and leave your comments below. Number 1, should Full Disclosure file a court order to gain media access to Mr. Fine in jail? Yes or no? Number 2, who's protecting who? Do you think the sheriff is protecting Judge Yaffe? Yes or no? Or number 3, do you think the sheriff is hiding something about the condition of Mr. Fine? Yes or no? Be sure to leave your comments below. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you.
In the government, there's a phrase used to restrict access to information. That phrase, need to know. At fulldisclosure.net, we want you to have all the information you need to be an informed citizen, unlimited access to all the information we've gathered on our TV show, and if you can't watch us on your local cable station, streaming video of complete shows when you want them. Fulldisclosure.net, when you need to know the news behind the news.
Can a judge sit on a case where he has a personal interest in one of the parties before him? The U.S. House Judiciary Committee is planning a hearing on the federal recusal guidelines amid controversies that have swept through the state court systems in recent years. But what about when the judge is a defendant? It makes no sense anywhere in the rational world. But here in California, it's happened. And if once wasn't enough, it's happening again right now. Full Disclosure has been following the sorry saga of the incarceration of attorney Richard Fine, who has challenged California judges who have accepted illegal payments. He has filed numerous petitions, writs of habeas corpus, that he be let out of jail. His first appeal was denied by U.S. District Court Judge John Walter and Magistrate Judge Carla Worley. Marty Mason was the former office manager for Mr. Fine's law firm. She explained to Fred Sotilli on the set of Full Disclosure what Mr. Fine did in response to the denial of his writ.
So he filed an appeal with the Ninth Circuit Court. Judge Affey from the Superior Court answered that appeal and apparently made some false statements to the court and even cited to an order that doesn't even exist. And we know that because I pulled a copy of the docket and we've all looked at it. There's no such order listed anywhere on it, so it doesn't exist.
So Mr. Fine prepared a new petition with the district court showing the new evidence involving Judge Affey.
And he also named as parties to the petition the district court, specifically these same judges, Walter and Worley, as respondents because they had refused to follow the statute, USC section 2243, and when they denied the first petition.
The statute USC 2243 that Marty references requires the court to act immediately by either releasing the petitioner or by denying the writ or to show cause. They did none of the above. And so Mr. Fine named both the judges as defendants in his appeal petition to the district court.
Fred took down those documents to file with the district court, and we were given the shock of the year on what level of deviousness they're willing to play with the case these days.
Fred Sotilli, a volunteer who files all of Mr. Fine's petitions with the court, described what Marty referred to as the shock of the year.
This started off to be a real easy job for a day. Simply go down and file these documents, and the people that work there in the pro se window in the federal building are really very nice, helpful people. So I went down and I brought these 4 documents and I said, well, we're going to file these today. And they said, okay, no problem. And I said, I need to know who the judges are going to be, who you're going to assign these to. And they said, well, we're going to assign them to Judge Walter and Judge Carla Worley. And I said, well, you know, I felt kind of smug about it. I said, well, you can't do that. You see, they're the defendants. If you look on page 2, you see that, and the girl at that window, she looked on page 2 and says, oh, you're right, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Let me go talk to my supervisor.
The supervisor wasn't going to change court procedure to follow the law.
She talked to her for about 5 minutes, and then it was pretty heated looking, and she came out and took about 10 steps and then went back in and talked to her again. And finally she came out and she said, look, I know it doesn't make any sense and it doesn't seem right, but since it's a pro se filing, it has to be reviewed by Judge John Walter, and it will then be assigned to Magistrate Judge Carla Worley. I said, well, one of these documents says that we don't want a magistrate judge, and this is our right and everything. And she says, well, I know, but this is our procedure, so we have to follow it. I'm just a clerk. And I said, okay, I appreciate that, but you do realize that I'll be back next week with motions to recuse those people, you know, and everything rightfully so. And she said, yes, procedurally, that's what you should do. Unfortunately, you'll have to do that, and we'll see you next week.
So the wheels of the court bureaucracy slowly turned, but they turned on Fred Sotilli and Mr. Fine.
Well, I came back the following week, and now there was a man at the window, and another really nice guy, and he's used to seeing me. Hi, how you doing? And I said, well, here's the recusals as promised. And he said, I'm familiar with the case, and just let me have those, and we'll take care of it right away. And he opened the computer, and he said, I don't believe it. He says, I can't file these. I said, well, you have to. He said, well, I can't. The case is closed. I said, wait a minute. I brought this last Friday. When was the case closed? He said, it was closed on Wednesday, the following Wednesday. I said, well, who did it? And he actually turned the computer around. He says, you see the signature? Judge John Walter.
Judge John Walter dismissed and closed the case in which he was named a defendant. How could this happen in any court in America?
I told Mr. Fine, and he said, well, you can't do that. That's ridiculous. He said, there's an FRCP rule. It's called Rule 60. And we'll have to invoke that in order to actually file those papers. A judge can't rule in a case where he's the defendant. This all started with Judge Yaffe doing this. He ruled in a case where he's the defendant. That's why Richard's in jail. And now these judges do the same thing, backing up Judge Yaffe by committing the same crime. I mean, anybody would see how unethical that would be to be the judge in your own case, and that's what he did. He did it. First Yaffe did it, then Walter and Worley did it, then they did it again. So now, this is where we are right now anyway. They just don't get it. They're obviously not stupid people. So what are they?
We asked longtime paralegal Marty Mason to give her opinion on the conduct of the Los Angeles Superior Court and this U.S. District Court judge.
Well, since it's such a no-brainer, such a simple issue that you cannot be a judge in a case in which you're a party, then I really even hate to use the word, but it is no exaggeration to say that this is just a bombshell of a cover-up. Judge Walter and Magistrate Judge Worley have gone way out on a limb to dismiss a case in which they are parties. Obviously, that is going to go up to the Ninth Circuit on appeal. The situation has just gotten so ridiculous. I keep wondering if the head judge of the entire district, Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, won't just show up someday and bang some heads together, because it's ridiculous.
So Marty Mason indicates that this case, where the U.S. District Court Judge John Walter sat in judgment and dismissed a case against himself, may have to go to the U.S. Supreme Court and Justice Kennedy. She suggests that there may not be a judge anywhere in California who will take the proper action.
As bad as it was, the situation with the under-the-table payments to the local judges, that is nothing compared to what is going on now. Now it's about whether we even still have a judicial system. And we certainly do not, if it is possible, for a judge to rule on a case that involves him personally.
Indeed, there is a question whether or not we've lost our judicial system. In 2007, and as recent as November 2009, the judges of the 2nd Appellate District of the state of California, all 31 of them, have recused themselves from the case of Sturgeon versus the County of Los Angeles, where Judicial Watch organization has been battling in court to stop the illegal payments being made to the judges. So when 31 justices of the Court of Appeals recognize the conflict and can no longer function in their official capacity, perhaps this substantiates that our judicial system is threatened. We would like to know what you, the viewers, think. Number 1. Do you think there's a possibility that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal will let stand Judge Walter's decision to dismiss a case where he was the defendant? Yes or no? Number 2, do you think that a court administrator that assigns a case to a judge that is named as a defendant in the case should be prosecuted? Yes or no? Number 3, should judges who have been found to have a conflict of interest in a case and have refused to recuse themselves be prosecuted, punished, and fined? Yes or no? Be sure to leave your comments below. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you.
For the news behind the news, wherever and whenever you want it, go to fulldisclosure.net and get programs on topics affecting you, weekly updates and alerts on hot topics, video streaming of Full Disclosure episodes. It's award-winning, hard-hitting, corruption-fighting news coverage. And it's only available at fulldisclosure.net. Fulldisclosure.net, the news behind the news.
Here in California, bond ratings are in the toilet, and the state can't pay its bills. Government employees are being laid off, and union employees are mobilizing their forces to prevent the rating of their lucrative pension plans. The elected officials are between a rock and a hard place, so the elected officials have finally decided to take urgent action. What did they do? They called a hearing so that they could get together and talk to themselves and pretend like they were trying to solve the problem. Naturally, Full Disclosure was there. We're over here across the street from the Museum of Tolerance, where the Senate Select Committee and Assembly Committees just held a hearing on the subject of government reforms.
I think what the committee really did up there was a dog and pony show. It's what I would call a dog and pony show.
They tried to prevent Full Disclosure from recording the hearing, but when KTLA showed up, they couldn't stop us without stopping them. So we got inside with our cameras. What did we get for our efforts? Hours of meaningless drivel.
One of the principles that I've come to really...
In the instances where there were outcomes established, was there a change in the legislative and the political cultures? Because I at least am sensing, and maybe I'm just hopefully just too hopeful.
And I've been on budget committee before and in budget subcommittee hearings. I don't understand the issues I'm voting on. I mean, it's absurd.
The thing I would say here is that any fundamental change is going to incur resistance.
We are running a little long because we're having an important conversation.
They spent hours talking to themselves, and after an eternity of government babble, they allowed the people in the attendance only 15 minutes for public comment. But the public wasn't having any of that dog and pony show. Instead of discussing the mundane bureaucratic speak, the public gave the legislators a piece of their mind. It's government corruption. That's the problem in California, not the overtaxed public. Interestingly, the ire of the public focused on the courts.
Before we talk about taxes and budgets and those sort of things, let's talk about the corruption and the waste.
Our judicial system is the most corrupt judicial system in the nation, in Los Angeles, California. You need to know that.
The audience was aware of the jailed Mr. Richard Fine, who has sounded the clarion call identifying the illegal payments being made to the LA Superior Court judges.
Some of you up here, go talk to Mr. Fine in court, and let's solve our legal problem, and let's get rid of these illegally paid judges.
With regards to this particular hearing, when talking about government reform, oversight, and cost savings, I think I would agree with this gentleman here that the courts are really a place to look. I think we need additional oversight over the courts, which with as much money as they get from our state budget.
You have no clue how uptight the voters are. There will be pitchforks taken out in June of 2010, I promise you.
I do agree with this gentleman about Richard Fine. He did uncover that there was double charging of extra legal benefits they were charging both the counties and the states. He was jailed for it.
Gabriella Holt brought up the nefarious vote taken during the budget debate that supposedly made the payments to the judges legal.
Senator Steinberg, who interestingly enough convened this committee with Assemblywoman Bass, introduced SB X 211, which approved supplemental pay and benefits of judges throughout the state, in direct contradiction to an appellate court decision, Sturgeon versus the County of Los Angeles, which made these payments illegal.
And it involved introducing an ex post facto law, which is against the California Constitution and the federal Constitution.
This SB 2X11 was passed on a weekend extraordinary session, and the only one I would blame is Senator Steinberg, who put it in there.
It was apparent that the attendees were disappointed by the meaningless committee hearing.
You gentlemen are basically, what you're telling us here today, those of us that didn't fall asleep, you're rearranging the chairs on the Titanic.
We spoke with Gabriella Holt, who is the president and CEO of the Citizens for California Reform, to get her reaction. She was unimpressed by this hearing that was supposed to be all about government reform.
They got up there and they said some really nice language: zero-based budgeting, performance-based budgeting, responsibility, changing the culture. You know, all those buzzwords that people say over and over and over. Oh, we're really going to get reform, we're going to get a balanced budget, they're going to do all these things. People don't know what that means.
She clearly and succinctly identified the problem.
And the fact of the matter is, those legislators don't listen to the people. They listen to themselves and they listen to their special interests. They're doing this whole reform because there's all these reform movements out there right now. And it's, you know, if they don't start talking about it on the inside, it's going to come from the outside. Well, little do they know it's coming from the outside anyway.
Well, I noticed that the chairman, Mike Fuhrer, tried to cut you off a couple of times. Do you feel that you had adequate time to say what you had to say?
Absolutely not. They had a dozen panelists. They had 90 minutes scheduled for their presentation. They took 2.5 hours. A dozen people. So about a dozen people lined up to speak, and they got 15 minutes. The public gets 15 minutes, and the dog and pony gets 2.5 hours. Last I saw, that the legislators and the staffers work for the people. We don't work for them. And frankly, it should have been the other way around. They should have done a succinct presentation and then opened it up to the public and allowed them to speak as long as they needed to speak. But what's interesting to me is generally when you have public hearings, you have it in a public place, you know, open to the public so anybody can come in. Coming into somewhere where it's very guarded and you know, very secured and very controlled, where the public just really doesn't have as easy as access to, is very interesting to me. Why they didn't hold it at City Hall, the County Board of Supervisors, you know, on Building of Administration. We got lots of public buildings.
So in other words, you kind of think the reason they had it here at this private facility is to limit the amount of public participation?
I believe that to be true, yes. I believe that to be true. You're a public agency, you're having a public hearing.
She brings up an interesting point. There was little public notice, and as we found out, it was tightly controlled. Was the lack of audience attendance designed on purpose?
We have changes in administrations and leadership.
So in other words, you kind of think the reason they had it here at this private facility is to limit the amount of public participation?
I believe that to be true, yes. I believe that to be true. You're a public agency, you're having a public hearing, you know, where was the 72-hour notice, you know, for the public? I mean, where was the information? And where's the public access?
We asked her what she thought the legislators learned from the hearing. Looking at all the people that testified today, what do you think was the message that came out of the testimony from the public?
I think the primary concern of the people who testified was the judiciary system on a number of things. You know, the corruption in the courts, you know, questions on decisions, and just who's overseeing the courts, and why is it that it seems that the courts are virtually left without any oversight or any way for people to come forward and express their concerns. That was an overwhelming sort of tenor of almost every person that spoke, I believe.
We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Please respond to our survey and leave your comments below. Number 1. Do you think that corruption in the judiciary is a major problem in California? Yes or no? Number 2, do you think it's government bureaucracy that's the major problem in California? Yes or no? Or number 3, is it the legislators and the elected officials that are the problem in California? Yes or no? Be sure to leave your comments below. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you. This is a quick update on our struggle to reestablish public access television in Los Angeles. It is just a small segment of a documentary that we are producing showing the problems facing public access channels across America. This sequence that you're going to see was recorded in the office of LA City Councilman Bill Rosendahl with Stanley Scheinbaum.
As to whether the City Council here in LA is going to get around to bringing back public access.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not.
No.
Now, what about the proposal that we put together to start with one channel?
I think it's a great proposal, and I think you need to lobby my colleagues on it. You know, and if we can get the pressure going, maybe Time Warner would give us the channel. They don't have to. That's the problem. They can go like this and say, hey, it's all Sacramento, folks. Sorry.
So it appears that we're back at square one, but we're not going to quit. The LA City Council's unmotivated to relinquish the millions of dollars that they receive from Time Warner, which is being paid by subscribers specifically to support public access television. So we're going to rally our troops and show the City Council that the citizens of Los Angeles demand they give us back our voice, give us back our public access. We need a grassroots army to storm City Hall. To enlist in the fight, please call me here at Full Disclosure at 310-822-4449 or send me your email at lesliedutton@fulldisclosure.net. We need your help and support. Together we can win back our public airwaves. We will continue to bring you updates in our mission to bring public concerns to you, the public, in our News Behind the News. Thank you.
To respond to this question or comment on this program, please call 800-867-7777 or visit fulldisclosure.net. Transcripts or DVD copies of this program are also available on our website. Full Disclosure, the news behind the news.
So basically, what's come out of the ACLU at this particular point in time is zero.
Richard Fine has been languishing in jail for a year, with no sentence, no bail, no recourse to gaining his freedom. The American Civil Liberties Union has long been known for supporting the oppressed rights of those victimized by an overzealous police and judiciary. Where is the ACLU today, and what are they doing to help Mr. Fine? Find out next on Full Disclosure.
Relentless, probing, fearless. This is Emmy Award-winning Full Disclosure with Leslie Dutton, bringing you the truth by revealing the news behind the news.
Hello, I'm Leslie Dutton. Today on Full Disclosure, we're bringing you the news behind the news in this ongoing series about judicial benefits and court corruption, featuring interviews with the ACLU and Mr. Richard Fine from his cell in the Los Angeles County Men's Central Jail, where he's being held in solitary confinement. Mr. Fine has been fighting to win his release for an entire year, filing writs and briefs from the California Supreme Court to the U.S. District Court and all the way up to the U.S. Federal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. At every turn, we have seen unbelievable abrogation of court procedures, where judges have completely ignored Supreme Court precedent and capriciously ruled against Mr. Fine again and again. Where could he turn, we ask him. Well, what about the ACLU? Do they have any power as jail monitors for the sheriff?
I'm not sure what their powers are under the decree of the case that they won that made them the monitor. Judging from their letter, the only thing that they've done at this particular point in time is to go in and write a letter.
On January 5th, Mr. Fine broke his upper dental plate, making it impossible for him to chew. He attempted to have it repaired by filing an inmate complaint with the sheriff, which, like all of his court filings, was promptly and completely ignored. Hearing of his plight, Full Disclosure asked longtime ACLU supporter Ed Asner to use his influence to convince the ACLU to intercede on Mr. Fine's behalf. He generously obliged, and within the next day, the ACLU visited Mr. Fine. On January 25th, the the ACLU wrote Mr. Fine this letter, which is basically a form letter identifying him and his complaint number 47952. They stated, "It is reported that the plate in inmate's dentures broke and he is unable to eat. Please ensure that inmate receives proper dental care and he is given food that he can eat." Being full disclosure, we wanted to see what the ACLU considered was their responsibility as a court-appointed jail monitor. So we took our cameras and headed to the Los Angeles headquarters of the ACLU. There we interviewed Mary Tiedemann, the ACLU's jail project coordinator, and Peter Eliasberg, the managing attorney of the ACLU of Southern California. Mary was familiar with Mr. Fine's predicament.
Yeah, I saw him a couple of weeks ago, and then I saw him again today, actually, just to talk to him about his medical issue, and then he was having some problems with the complaint system.
We asked Mary to define the scope of her work within the LA County jails.
What the Jails Project does is we monitor orders in the Rutherford versus Baca lawsuit, which is about overcrowding conditions, and we also deal with medical and mental health care issues that come up for people who are in the county jails.
And how do you, since you haven't seen Mr. Fine before January 25th, how was it? Do you monitor everybody or just some people?
Generally, I mean, there are nearly 20,000 people incarcerated in the LA jails, and there are 7 jails, and we just, based on, you know, where the problems kind of tend to be, we focus a lot on Men's Central Jail, which is downtown, which is where Mr. Fine is.
But in doing that, Mary and other people who work with Mary make regular visits to the jail, so we are constantly talking to people. We also get letters that we follow up on. We get phone calls that we follow up on. So I think we see it as our mission to monitor conditions for everybody, but you know, it's larger than most state universities who are in this jail. It's the largest jail system in the country by far, and so it's our responsibility, but it would be impossible, and we don't talk to every inmate on a daily or weekly or even monthly basis, but we do respond to complaints, and we also try to figure out ourselves what's going on by making visits. So it's not only complaint driven.
Yeah,
it is driven by going and looking
knowing
and talking.
Where the kind of issue areas are. And
Mr. Fine was unimpressed by the actions of the ACLU.
The ACLU coming in as the monitoring of the health part, sending a letter and saying if nothing happens within 10 days to call them or contact them.
Your call may be monitored or recorded
At a telephone number that is blocked.
We asked the ACLU representatives why they block calls from inmates in the jail that they are supposed to be monitoring. Did Mr. Fine tell you that he tried to reach you at the phone number that was given to him to call you?
yeah, we talked about that. He was under the impression it accepted collect calls, and it does not. So that he had been trying to call it collect, and we don't accept collect calls right now.
Another phone interview a day later, we clarified the inability of the ACLU to help Mr. Fine. You said that the ACLU told you that they could not assist you with a court order?
That's right. They said that they could not do anything to get me the court order. And I said to them, well, basically, aren't you the ones that are supposed to really be helping me on this? And they said that they don't get court orders.
While we were at the ACLU, we asked them to explain how they performed their tax-supported monitoring function on behalf of inmates such as Mr. Fine.
Well, we sent the jail, the captain of the jail is the head person that oversees all the ins and outs of Men's Central Jail. So we sent him a letter requesting that they provide all the dental services that Mr. Fine needs so that he can eat. He showed me the backs. He doesn't have the back molars on his teeth. So we did that, and I sent Mr. Fine we sent all the inmates a copy of the complaint that we sent to the jail so that they have that for their records. And I sent that a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember the exact date, but he should have a copy. He should be getting a copy. He didn't have it yet today when I was there, but the mail in jail is slow.
The mail in jail isn't just slow, it's questionable. We have asked for a copy of the letter that they sent to the sheriff, and Gordon Smith, the ACLU communications director, refused us twice. To date, Mr. Fine has yet to receive his copy. We're going to take a quick break right now, and when we come back, we'll hear how well the inmate complaint system of the jail works under the watchful eye of the ACLU jail monitors. We'll be right back.
In the government, there's a phrase used to restrict access to information. That phrase, need to know. At fulldisclosure.net, we want you to have all the information you need to be an informed citizen, unlimited access to all the information we've gathered on our TV show. And if you can't watch us on your local cable station, streaming video of complete shows when you want them. Fulldisclosure.net, when you need to know the news behind the news.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure and our examination of the ACLU and the court-ordered jail monitoring project. As a result of the Rutherford versus Bachman judgment, the ACLU is supposed to advocate on behalf of inmates in the LA County jails. With our ongoing contact with Mr. Fine from his jail cell, we had an excellent opportunity to see how well the ACLU is doing its job. Mr. Fine has claimed that he filed a complaint on January 5th and that there was no response to it and nobody could find it.
Yeah, he showed, I think that he got a response to that complaint like the 9th, that was yesterday.
Well, do you think that, or do you consider it a responsibility of your jail monitoring program to inquire about the status of complaints that inmates tell you that they've filed?
Yeah, we regularly follow up on complaints that we have filed because we track what we file and we ensure that there are there's follow-up, and we'll sometimes follow up on the response that we get to make sure that it's sufficient.
Mr. Fine has filed numerous complaints with the sheriff, most importantly, refuting his unlawful incarceration. They seem to have completely disappeared. Is it a concern, or is it the policy of the ACLU to try to follow up and locate what's happened to a complaint that appears to be missing or not acted upon?
Yes.
And how do you do that?
I inquired to the sheriff's department about what happened. You know, this inmate filed a complaint on this date. He put it in this box. What's the tracking number? There have been problems where complaints just disappear, and there have been times when I've filed a complaint myself on behalf of an inmate and put it in the box, and it didn't get responded to.
So, then what? When Mr. Fine sent a second complaint about his broken dental plate, he was jerked around by the bureaucracy.
Yesterday, what happened is that I received a notice to go down to the medical department, and on the notice it said court order. And I figured, well, maybe the ACLU must have done something, to get a court order to have me go out and have my dental fixed. But when I got downstairs, they told me that the court order was just meaningless. Those were just words that they used, and I had a clerk that wanted to have me sign off that we had a discussion with respect to the dental plate. And I said, well, what discussion are we having? And she said, well, sign off that we talked about this. And I said, well, we haven't talked about it. I said, what discussion? She said, well, you didn't sign a paper before. And I said, so? She said, well, sign here that you're going to sign this. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And so we never had a discussion. I said, and I told her, I said, if you want to tell me that we're discussing, my plate and what's going to be done about it, let's discuss that. She said, no, I'm not going to discuss that. I said, well, did you know that the ACLU has written you? And she said, no. I said, well, maybe you'll have to review your file. She said, I'm not going to do
Mary Tiedemann apparently accepts this as standard procedures in the jail.
I mean, my experience is sometimes the inmates are asked to sign stuff as to resolve complaints. It's on the sheriff's complaint form that the inmates sign that they have received follow-up on their complaint, and sometimes there's a little bit of I don't know if confusion's the word, but there's some problems with when the inmates sign that something was addressed, and I think Mr. Fine wanted to have, or Mr. Fine thought he was being asked to sign something before it was addressed, and so he said he refused to sign the paper.
He's an attorney, isn't he? We pressed the issue. What is the ACLU going to do to help Mr. Fine get some teeth so he can eat?
The next step is we're trying to figure out, because there seems to be some discrepancy between with what, with getting him to physically see the dentist and get some impressions made on his teeth, and with what Mr. Fine told me today, and what was my understanding from the jail regarding getting him to the dentist was a little bit different. So I'm trying to see what we can do to get him to the dentist.
The discrepancy, as he explained it to us in a collect phone call, we accept his charges, was that they have not yet to date offered to take an impression of his teeth.
Yeah, there was some kind. I haven't been able to fully look into it because, like I said, I got back from jail about 2.5 hours ago, and I haven't been able to talk to the person at the sheriff's department I need to talk to because they weren't there when I contacted them. What happened when he was taken to the clinic? Why Mr. Fine didn't think he saw a dentist or didn't see a dentist, and why they thought he had refused to see a dentist. So
they thought he had refused to see a dentist?
Yes.
They're saying that to you?
There was some confusion about what was going on with his impressions.
The form letter from the ACLU to Mr. Fine referred him to seek help from 4 other agencies: the LA County Bar Association, the Sheriff's Department Internal Affairs Division, the County Ombudsman, and the Department of Mental Health. The lawyers in the County Bar Association are all too terrified of Mr. Fine's condemnation of the Superior Court judges to get involved. The Internal Affairs and Ombudsman have basically ignored all of his appeals for the last year, and he was amused by the last referral. Another organization the ACLU is referring you to is the Mental Health Assistance Organization for Patients' Rights. What do you think of that as a possible source of help?
Well, we don't have a mental health problem here. What we have here is a problem of the sheriff not telling the truth. So I doubt if they're going to be any help.
The letter from the ACLU had this disclaimer: if you are seeking legal representation to seek damages from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department or assistance with a criminal or parole matter, please understand that the ACLU is unable to assist you.
Well, I'm not seeking either of those two things. I'm seeking to have the Sheriff's Department do its constitutional job of taking care of me medically, which is what the ACLU says they're supposed to be doing, I believe, in the earlier part of their letter.
It doesn't sound from this letter, it doesn't sound like they're planning on checking on you again. This sounds like they feel the matter is resolved and they've gave you referrals. Is that how you interpret it?
Well, I interpreted that the referrals that they gave me are meaningless, and it sounds to me like they say that they feel that they resolved the matter by writing their one line, and if they don't hear from me again, then in their opinion they've resolved the matter. Of course, they don't tell you that their phone line is blocked.
Peter Eliasberg offered this response to the people who suggest the ACLU's efforts are not worthy of the money they are being paid to serve as jail monitors.
we try to provide the best service we can, but I know that lots of people come to us and hope we'll take their cases, and we don't for a huge variety of reasons. And they, occasionally I will then read on blogs or other places on the internet, the ACLU is useless. Well, we do a lot of cases, but we don't represent everybody, and we don't help everyone. There are limits to our resources.
With their limited resources, are they doing the best they can? We asked Mr. Fine what he thought. If they didn't hear from you within 10 days of the 25th of January, they could say that everything was fine because they didn't hear from you.
Well, they'll make the assumption that everything's fine because I can't get through to their blocked telephone number.
For the news behind the news, wherever and whenever you want it, go to fulldisclosure.net and get programs on topics affecting you, weekly updates and alerts on hot topics, video streaming of Full Disclosure episodes. It's award-winning, hard-hitting, corruption-fighting news coverage. And it's only available at fulldisclosure.net. fulldisclosure.net, the news behind the news.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure and our examination of the ACLU Jail Monitoring Project. Suddenly, without a warning, a miracle happened.
This morning, at approximately, I would say, 7 o'clock this morning, the jail came to me and said that I had a pass to go to the dentist. And they came and they took me to the dentist, and all of a sudden, the dentist said that they were going to do a mold on my mouth. Now, this is the same dentist, exact same person, that told me the last time that I was there that he couldn't do anything. And not only couldn't, but would not do anything. The very, very exact same dentist. And suddenly, he was now doing a mold on my upper mouth. And in addition to that, he told me that he took my plate, and he said that he's now going to fix my plate.
What on earth brought about this phenomenal change, we asked him.
The only thing that I can think of is that I put in a complaint the other day, which had 3 parts to it. And one of the parts to it was that I was complaining that I had been told that the jail said, that a dentist in the jail said that I had refused to have a mold taken of my mouth. And in my complaint, I said that that statement was a total lie.
He questioned the jail sergeant about how this transpired.
After I came back, the sergeant, Sergeant Levy, came in to check on me and to say that he understood that they had taken a mold of my mouth. And I said, yes. And I asked him, what caused the change? And he said, well, the only problem was that it was a question of who was going to pay for this. And I said, well, I never heard that story before. And I said, because that hasn't been resolved as far as I'm concerned, because I'm not paying for it. And he said, well, evidently it's been resolved.
According to the ACLU, the Sheriff Department sent them an email notifying them that Mr. Fine met the criteria for the Sheriff's Department to replace his dental plate. So the financial issue was apparently resolved within the Sheriff's Department. Yes, that's remarkable. And especially in light of the fact that the ACLU apparently did not have anything to do with it, since they basically said it would take a court order and they couldn't get one.
My suspicion is that when my complaint got to Sergeant Levy, that he just sent it right down to the dental people, and then all of a sudden the dental people decided that they had the capability.
Meanwhile, back at ACLU, both Mary Tiedemann and Peter Eliasberg expressed their dissatisfaction with the jail inmate complaint system.
The fact is, we're not thrilled with the inmate complaint process. We're very unhappy.
The complaint system is a big problem. That's something that we've been working on with them constantly.
In fact, it's not unusual at all, unfortunately, that complaints are not responded to, or, well, either not easy to file or not responded to in the way, or take a long time to be responded to. I wish Mr. Fine's situation, again, was an unusual one. It's not. It's actually
at
common.
all. And it's very common for us to follow up and say, this person has filed a complaint and he has gotten no response. What is going on with his complaint?
So this has been a problem for a long time. What are they doing about it, besides filing another complaint about the deficiencies of the complaint process? Doesn't the ACLU have any clout in the jail? Apparently, a little bit more than a jail inmate.
We file complaints with the sheriff's, like I said, it's basically a referred complaint to the sheriff's department, but it's through us, so there's, I think, a higher level of scrutiny, and they know that it's being tracked not from an inmate, but from, from here, so those get responses.
We can take comfort that after almost a month without the ability to chew, Mr. Fine may get his dental plate repaired or replaced so that he can eat the jail food once again.
Where we are now standing, the dentist in the jail, who told me that he could not do anything and would not do anything, has now taken a mold of my mouth and has taken my plate and has said that he is going to be fixing my plate.
So Mr. Fine may be able to eat while he continues suffering his indeterminate sentence of coercive solitary confinement for contempt of court, even though he's never been convicted. Why is he doing this? Especially at the cost of his career, his family, and potentially his freedom for the rest of his life.
Unless we fight this corruption right now, this corruption will erode our entire governmental system. So we have to fight it now and stop it now before it erodes everything.
He stands alone in his profession. No other attorneys have stood with him to fight the illegal payments the judges are receiving every month. Apparently, they are too afraid to suffer the abuse that Mr. Fine is enduring.
We have 208,000 California attorneys, and unfortunately, not one of them has stood up to fight this corruption. That is the level of fear that has been put in to the California bar.
And what about the mainstream media? Where is the Los Angeles Times? Where are the network television news commentators? Why aren't they condemning the Judge Payola scheme that has been corrupting the California court system for the past 2 decades? Why aren't they performing their most important function of informing the people?
And the level of fear that has been put into the media, but for what you are doing, with full disclosure, to go in and show what is happening, you're correct. People would not know of this. So it is a tribute to full disclosure that you are going out and you're showing what is really happening.
And as the judges move up the ladder from the LA Superior Court to the California Supreme Court, the U.S. District Court, and even the Ninth Circuit Court, the corruption spreads. All along the way, we've seen each higher court flagrantly violate due process to protect their brothers in the lower courts. And it's because they all came from the same good old boys club, the LA Superior Court.
There's no question that with 430 judges, and assuming that most, if not all of them, had taken these payments, I mean, this is probably one of the largest racketeering enterprises going. So we are still searching at this point in time to still find that one honest judge.
Still trying to find one honest judge, he remains in solitary confinement in the Los Angeles County Central Jail. We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Is it possible that Ramona Ripston, the executive director of the ACLU, is married to Circuit Court Justice Stephen Reinhart, and that fact is intimidating the court-appointed monitors of the ACLU from being more proactive in aiding Mr. Fine? please call our Full Disclosure Town Hall number at 1-800-867-7777. That's 1-800-867-7777. And if you leave your name and number, we'll get back to you. Or you can log on to our website at fulldisclosure.net and leave your opinion there. And if you leave your email address, we'll be happy to respond. I'm Leslie Dutton. Please join us next time for another edition of Full Disclosure. Thank you.
To respond to this question or comment on this program, please call 800-867-7777 or visit fulldisclosure.net. Transcripts or DVD copies of this program are also available on our website. Full Disclosure, the news behind the news.